Well, hi everyone, it's Kelly at Women for One, and on this blistery winter day in December, I am so excited to be speaking with the guest, Amy Newmark, today. I've just been so excited about talking with her because what she does and what she represents is so aligned with Women for One. So let me just tell you a little bit about Amy before we welcome her on so she can share her story with us. So Amy is the author and the editor-in-chief and publisher of the 23-year-old Chicken Soup for the Soul book series. And she's also the creator and host of its successful new podcast as well, which I think is great because we really are moving into the podcast land now. And I think is so fabulous that she's taken it into this new territory. Since she stepped in as a publisher in 2008, she's edited and published over 132 new books in the series. So that's like doubling the total number of Chicken Soup for the Soul books in print today. And I just want to say I've grown up on Chicken Soup for the Soul. My children all know it. Every person that I speak with, you say Chicken Soup for the Soul, everyone knows it. So I feel like this series has laid the groundwork for me creating Women for One and people courageously sharing their stories to inspire others. So I'd like to welcome Amy and I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about your history and your story.
Well, thanks for having me on your show because I looked at some of your past interviews and it is a great, great thing that you're doing. And very similar to what I'm doing, which is that you are bringing together powerful stories, sometimes from ordinary people who happen to have had extraordinary experiences, and then you're sharing those to inspire people and give them hope and advice and great tips for how they can improve their own lives. And so you and I are very much aligned in what we do.
Yes, we are. It's wonderful.
And so I started out on Wall Street, but people think, oh, that's evil, but it's not evil. It's not at all evil. I mean, I was always very altruistic in what I did. And in fact, I worked at a firm where you were only supposed to issue buy recommendations on stocks. And I said, but what about when I see a stock that I think should be sold? Don't I need to protect people and say, hey, don't buy this stock? And if you own it, go ahead and sell it? Because isn't that good for people also? And so I was a little unpopular for the fact that I would go out and tell people when they should sell stocks as well as buy them. And I was actually the first analyst on Wall Street, maybe the only analyst in history ever sued by a New York Stock Exchange company for issuing a sell recommendation on their stock.
Wow.
Yeah, it was kind of scary because they were suing me for millions of dollars. And there I was working from my home at that point because I had two little kids, like a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old. And I happened to have figured out that this company was committing accounting fraud. And so I let the SEC know, and I let the investors in the stock know, and the company got really angry at me, hired a private detective firm to go after me, did all these horrible things to me, hired a former high-level person at the SEC to go after me. He ended up becoming chairman of the SEC years later. So I had all these powerful people coming after me, but I knew what I knew, and I knew that they were committing fraud. So I would say even when I was on Wall Street, I was always looking out for people, telling stories that were true, and making sure that I was helping people and doing the right thing. And so I had almost a 30-year career on Wall Street. I ran a hedge fund. I did all different things on Wall Street. And then I worked in business as an executive at a big telecommunications firm. And then I was on the board of directors of 6 different publicly traded technology companies. So I had almost 30 years of all of that work in technology and finance. And then in 2008, my husband and I, well, actually it was 2007, we were offered the opportunity to buy Chicken Soup for the Soul from its founders, Jack Canfield and Mark Victor Hansen. And we got together with some business partners and friends and family, did a ton of due diligence. And in 2008, we bought the company. And so all of a sudden I went from my hard-nosed business experience to chicken soup for the soul. So I went from, I guess, two emotions on Wall Street, fear and greed. Those are the emotions on Wall Street. And I went to the whole panoply of emotions at Chicken Soup for the Soul.
I love that story. And my question to you is, how and why did that shift happen? And also, how did it change you? Like where you shifted into acquiring this, going from the other story you're at. Like what was the in between there that helped you shift into that mindset of this is what we want to do now?
It it does seem like a huge shift, but on the other hand, everything I had always done involved storytelling and writing. Everything I did in business was about writing. I would write reports about stocks where I would tell stories and inspire people to go and buy a certain company. And when I worked for a big company, a big telecom company, or when I was on the boards of companies, I always did all of the writing, explaining things, telling the stories. And back in college, when I was in college, I majored in Portuguese and did research for my honors thesis and spent a semester in Brazil. Or guess what I did? I traveled around Brazil collecting stories from ordinary people because
Wow.
they had a form of popular literature there that was published in these little booklets called folietos, and it was regular people creating these stories. It was like the literature of the people, and I was the primary researcher in the country of Brazil at that time, researching this form of popular literature. It was stories and poems, and it's really funny because then 30 years later, when I turned 50 and we bought Chicken Soup for the Soul, I was collecting stories from the people again. So it really was a big circle, and there was always an overlay of doing the right thing and helping people, even though I was doing it on Wall Street initially, and now I'm doing it at Chicken Soup for the Soul.
Oh, that's interesting to connect the two like that, because I know, at Women for One and the different courses we do, we always talk about, how do you connect point A to point B to make your life happen in the way that you want it to happen? And it sounds like this shift really was your big leap to like full circling it, coming back to your passion, even in a more embodied way. Would you say a more full way where
Yes,
you
I think
purchased it?
it was like I don't want to say I grew up, but it was a more full way of doing it. And I hadn't even thought about the fact that I had been traveling around Brazil collecting stories from the people when I was 20 and 21. I didn't think about it until I was well into Chicken Soup for the Soul, and I was writing my bio one day because I hadn't had a resume in 30 years.
Wow.
And all of a sudden I said, "Oh my goodness, this is a big circle," but I hadn't even realized it myself. But what happened was that my husband was always in media, and so he looked at Chicken Soup for the Soul, and he said they have these great stories, they have this huge goodwill. Everybody understands what Chicken Soup for the Soul is about, and now we have the internet. And my husband had television and film experience, and he had started a big internet business in his prior incarnation at that big telecom company I mentioned. And so he knew what to do to take Chicken Soup for the Soul to
Right.
the next level. And what I did was I sat down when we were doing the due diligence to buy the company, and I read 100 of the old Chicken Soup for the Soul books. It took me about 3 months. I just sat
You
on a
just went
couch.
for it. Yeah,
I
that's
just
awesome.
read like 3 books a week and got through all of them, and then actually selected my favorite stories to create new compilations. And we did all these best of books when we took over the company. And I really got to know what a Chicken Soup for the Soul story was all about. You asked how it was changed. Well, here's what people say now, and I don't really know how to take this, but people say that I'm so much nicer now. I know. It's like, okay, thank you so much for the compliment. You know,
I love
I mean,
it.
I guess I'm more grounded, and certainly when you read tens of thousands of stories written by other people and they're sharing these revealing moments and the ups and downs in their lives and the challenges they've overcome. And they're really sharing intimate details of their lives. I mean, often our readers are their first confidants.
Right.
You almost become like a psychologist. I mean, think about how many case studies I've read by reading tens of thousands.
How can it
of
not
chicken
change you? Like, how can
Right.
right.
It
How,
does.
it's not, how did it change me? How can it not change me is the answer to that question, right? By
You are
reading all of
totally right.
those.
And that's what I will say from now on, because yeah, what kind of person would I be if it didn't change me to read all these stories? Because what you learn from these stories is how wonderful your life is and how grateful you are for what you have. And I think these stories have made me more grounded. I am definitely more grateful. I was always a grateful person. I mean, half of us are really born with a natural ability to be grateful, to see the silver linings,
Mm-hmm.
to see the positive in every situation. I already had that going for me. I was lucky. I was born with that. But I think I have it even more now. And I am definitely so much less judgmental
Mm-hmm.
because I see all the different ways that people can mess up their lives. And
Absolutely. And
right?
I have such compassion for myself and for others reading the struggles people go through. And also I'm inspired by humanity. I'm inspired by, where we get jaded by the politics these days and by the world and where it is. But if you really look at the ordinary person, they're extraordinary, the way they
You
can
are
overcome
so
things.
right. This is what I've been seeing ever since I started doing this job. How good people really are and
Mm-hmm.
how they reach out to each other and help people. And actually, I've been seeing a dramatic increase in that in the past year or so.
Mm.
And we think everything is terrible and the country is so divided and we all vehemently disagree about, we voted for one person, somebody
Right.
else voted for another, and we've all been dealing with that at Thanksgiving family gatherings, and now we're going to deal with it at Christmas family gatherings. But here's what's really interesting. I see the stories coming in. I really feel like I get to be in touch with what people are thinking because we crowdsource all our books. So when you pick up one of our books and there are 101 stories in there, we read 5,000 stories
Wow.
to get down to 101. We're reading tens and tens of thousands of stories every year, and we're seeing what comes in and then we're reflecting it back. So here's a great example. We have a new Christmas book out for Christmas 2016. It's called Chicken Soup for the Soul, The Joy of Christmas. And we do a Christmas book almost every year, and they're different every year because they reflect what we get from people. And what blew me away this year with our Christmas book is the sense of community, communities coming together and helping each other. The emphasis from the people who have sent us the stories about how someone did something kind for them and now they're paying it forward, how they saw a need and they stepped in to fill it, how they were sitting in a restaurant and saw somebody who looked hungry and said, "May I buy you dinner?" All these wonderful things, somebody being in a store and remembering when somebody helped her buy a bike for her child 15 years ago when she couldn't afford it, and overhears a woman in the next aisle saying she can't afford to buy what she needs for her new baby, and stepping in and buying everything for that woman, taking her to the checkout counter and joyfully buying her everything she needs for her baby. This is the kind of story we got in our new Joy of Christmas book.
That's amazing. I almost think that some of the most dire circumstances are we have to push against by demonstrating our altruistic nature even more now. In this past year, we're like, no, we are not that. We are this. We are humanity. We are grateful. We are giving. We are beautiful. We are loving. I'm really noticing it too, Amy. So that's interesting that you're noticing that in the last year as well.
You know what it's taught me is to not try to squash that impulse. So, you know how sometimes you see something and you're like, oh, I don't know if I should interfere. Maybe they don't want my help. Like I was at the CVS drugstore. We're over a CVS, and I was there, and there's a halfway house for people with mental illness that's in the same parking lot as we're in, and I saw a guy, he didn't have the money to buy toenail clippers.
Hmm.
And everybody's standing in line and kind of tapping their feet. And I just thought, you know what? It's okay if I go buy the toenail clippers for him. So I just jumped out of the line, gave the cashier $2, said, don't worry about it, just take it, got back in the line. The line then moved. And I think I might have been afraid to do that in the past, not because I cared about the $2, but because I thought, oh, I shouldn't interfere. And now I
Right.
feel more like it's okay to act on that charitable impulse that you're feeling.
Well, it's okay to just act on your impulse, any impulse, and if it's altruistic. I think, I agree. We hold back in our society a lot instead of like do what's right, and just take that extra step and go that extra inch. I mean, that was just an inch for you, right? Not even.
It was a
It
nothing.
was
It
a
was a
nothing.
nothing.
Yeah.
But you know what? It made me feel good.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing that I hear all the time from people who wrote. We have a book that we just sent to the printer that's coming out in February 2017 called Chicken Soup for the Soul, Random Acts of Kindness. And every book that we have where people talk about doing good deeds, what they really talk about is how the biggest beneficiary, of course, was themselves. The person doing the good deed benefits even more than the person who's the recipient.
Absolutely. I completely agree. So, like with Chicken Soup for the Soul, it is the world's favorite and most recognized, as we've talked about, inspirational storyteller. Just on its own, it's like Amy is like its own entity. And my question to you is, why do you think its popularity has not only continued but grown over the years, and what sets it apart?
I think that we learn best from stories, right? If something happens to you, a good thing or a bad thing, a good thing, your child is getting married or you're having a baby or your boyfriend proposes, whatever it is, you turn to someone else in the same situation and you get advice. And if a bad thing happens, same thing, you are diagnosed with an illness, your grandmother dies, whatever it is, you turn to someone else who's had the same experience. We learn best through hearing other people's stories. It's how mankind has shared wisdom and culture and advice forever, right? For thousands of years, even in cultures without a written language. All of that is spread through storytelling. And so it is what we respond to best because we learn best when we're learning emotionally. That's what the schools have learned now with all the social emotional learning. And it's what we are great at. And because we have this big brand and we do such a high quality job, the writers out there want to share their stories with us, not with somebody else. So other anthology series have come and gone. Just while I've been doing this for 9 years, I've probably seen 15 competitors come and go. I don't even pay attention to them anymore. There's a guy right now who's trying to get all of our people to give stories to him. And they're all sending me these concerned emails. And I'm just saying, oh, I'm not worried about it. He's going to lose a lot of money and have thousands of books in his garage. Like there's something magical about the way that we do it. We have a great team. I've got a couple of people who've been with Chicken Soup for the Soul for 20 years. We know what makes a great story. We get the best stories submitted to us. We understand what topics are best. We are really good at editing the stories. And who else gets 5,000, 6,000 stories submitted for a book that's going to have 101 stories?
That's fabulous. That's wonderful. So you have a new title out that is your first solo title that I really want to discuss with you, the evolution of this book and what it meant for you to write it. Chicken Soup for the Soul, Simply Happy, which just recently came out this fall. Can you talk a little bit about it and how it kind of came to be?
Yes, this is my very, very special baby. So every book is my favorite while I'm making it, but Simply Happy, as you said, is my first solo effort. So this is a big emotional thing for me. Like I'm really putting myself out there now. And all of our other books that I've edited, my heart goes into them, but it's 101 stories primarily by other people, not by me.
Correct. Yeah.
The Simply Happy book is written solely by me, although I do refer to lessons I've learned from Chicken Soup for the Soul stories. But this is me, and I have shared so much of my personal life in here because people said to me, hey, your writers are doing it. You've got to do it too. And so I shared stuff in here my husband didn't know, my mother didn't know, my kids didn't know. It's it's my crash course in Chicken Soup for the Soul, Advice and Wisdom, because I told you I read those 100 books
Mm-hmm.
and it really changed me. I took all of everything that I learned so quickly from that crash course, reading those 100 books, plus then reading tens of thousands more Chicken Soup for the Soul stories over the next 8 years. And I put all of that together with what I've learned in my own life. And being a very analytical person, having come from Wall Street, I analyze everything and I analyze what works, what doesn't work. And so this book is very pragmatic because I am a very practical person. It has about 24 or more really major tips in it for giving you a happier life. And virtually every tip can be implemented in 1 second
Oh, wow.
just by deciding. Because almost everything is just a change in attitude. And if you decide, well, then you're going to be on a new path. So, for example, I was talking before about how I've learned to count my blessings and be grateful for what I have in my life. I actually don't think you can be happy unless you have learned to count your blessings and be grateful. And I was talking about how I would say half of us are born that way and half of us need to learn how to be grateful. The very cool thing about gratitude is it's one of the character traits you can add on later. It's an add-on, and it's very easy to add it on. And I have read probably 1,000 stories from people who added gratitude onto their list of traits by just diligently doing it for, say, a month. So they would do something like write down 3 things a day they were grateful for. And it had to be 3 different things each day. And at the end of a 30-day month, they had 90 things they had written down. And by just actively practicing gratitude, all of a sudden they found it was coming to them naturally. They were looking for the good things in their lives because they needed to write them on their list each day. And so I feel like gratitude is the gateway to happiness.
It
And
is.
so
So
that's in
is.
my book. And that's the kind of thing where you just change your attitude. And forgiveness is one of the traits that I think is very important. And so I ended the book with forgiveness because that's another thing. I feel that if you cannot shed all of those resentments and all those things you're angry about and things you might be bitter about, if you can't shed those things that have been piling up throughout your life, you really can't be happy. I visualize them as this like heavy cloak you're wearing, like, you know, a medieval king, and he's wearing that big, heavy fur cloak, except this cloak is weighing you down. It weighs 50 pounds, 100 pounds, and it's
Right.
covered with all your resentments and your disappointments and your frustrations with different people. And if you start analyzing, well, why did that person act that way? Was that person doing that to me personally or really just reacting to something else in her life,
Yeah, you get an
etc.?
awareness. You really
And
gain
then you
a
shed
deep
them and you kind of
awareness.
like shrug off that heavy cloak, right? And now you're light and free and you move forward.
Mm-hmm.
So that's in my book. And then so many other things that aren't nearly as earth shaking as gratitude or forgiveness, but lots of really easy tweaks to make yourself
Well, I
happy.
like that you said they're easy tweaks, they're practical, and that you can apply them to your daily life, which I think is really important in books these days. We need, in our society right now, we're needing things quickly. We need to, get things done. So it's kind of cool to have a book that you can read, that you can pick up and really get some tips that you can dig your teeth into, and then put the book down, then pick it up again and learn something. Is that and then there's also incredible stories of you in there as well, and
Yeah.
others.
So it is really easy to, you can pick it up, say, oh, I'm going to try this one tip. Put it down, pick it up again 2 weeks later. Say, all right, I did that one. Give me another one. And you can just pick whatever ones you want because you don't have to do everything that's in this book. But any one thing that you pick up and do from this book is going to change your life.
That's
Even one of
wonderful.
the really simple ones, because we all love making those tiny improvements to our lives. It's like cleaning out a junk drawer. Don't you feel great?
Yes.
Like those little tiny things, they actually really are liberating and you kind of feel lighter and you stand taller just from doing the little things. So I have plenty of those little tweaks. And the cool thing about them is once you do them, you won't stop doing them. They will be permanent tweaks to your life because you'll enjoy having done them so much that you'll just keep going.
That's wonderful. And it almost kind of feels reminiscent to Sarah von Brethnack's book, Simple Abundance, in some ways. So I'm really excited to even dig my teeth in more to this book. I think we can't cultivate enough joy in our lives and enough happiness. So any support and help that we get along the way from someone that's an expert like you, I'm in. I would take it in a heartbeat.
I
Sounds
also have
fabulous.
I have a lot of really practical tips for making your life easier because having been such a busy person and always worked part-time or full-time while raising my children, I have great parenting tips in here.
Mm.
And I guess I'm weird because I do some things that people say, "Oh, no, I've never heard of anybody else doing that." But oh, that makes so much sense. And so,
Can you give us a taste of one of them?
well, sure. So for child raising, I realized very early on with my own kids that what they really wanted was to feel that they had some kind of a control over some aspect of their lives, right? Nobody
Right.
wants to feel like they have no control at all.
Right.
And so from an early age, I started giving them control over the little things that didn't matter so that I could retain control over the big things that did matter, like making sure that I didn't have a pregnant 14-year-old or kids who were on drugs or kids
Right.
who were failing out of school or kids who were disrespectful to others, whatever. And so from a very early age, I every Christmas would give them what I called privilege coupons. So kids want to stay up an hour past bedtime. So you're always fighting about that. So I gave them 12 coupons that had to last a whole year.
That's
12
so
times they could
awesome.
stay up an hour past bedtime. 12 times they could watch an hour of TV on a school night. 4 times in a whole year they could have a soda when they wanted one. 4 times they could ask me to buy them a candy bar when we were at the drugstore. 3 times they could order a pay-per-view movie, whatever it was. These privileges that you kind of negotiate all year.
Hmm.
I gave them a coupon book with the number of these that I felt were okay for an entire year, and we never thought about it again. And I
That's so
guarantee you,
awesome. I need
they
that.
stayed up. They stayed up past bedtime fewer times. They watched less television. They ate less junk food. They did less of all of the things that you always fight about, and yet they felt they were totally in control
And
and they loved
empowered. It
it.
was their power. It was their choice, right? That you gave
Right.
them the choice.
Yeah. So if they
That's
want to watch
awesome.
TV for an hour on a school night, I'd say, fine, give me a coupon. By the end of the year, they were having trouble having used the coupons because they would ration them out so much over the course of the year, but they were in control and we were all happy.
Wow, that's really great. Well,
Great Christmas present.
it sounds like a great Christmas. Awesome. So the last question I have for you, and I want to talk to you about being a woman in this industry. And at Women for One, we seek to inspire women to make their lives happen. And I personally believe that women play a pivotal role in this new self-help industry, the new one now that's even evolving. And I wanted to ask you, how do you see women and yourself playing a role in spreading this everyday wisdom?
So it's interesting when self-help started, like when Chicken Soup for the Soul started, back then the self-help gurus, and they were mostly men,
Right.
probably just because mostly men were able to work full-time back then. I mean, I was on Wall Street back then, and it wasn't a lovely place to be for a woman.
Hmm.
But I think that the self-help industry has changed and has become more about sharing the guru's own experiences. And I'm saying guru in a loose way, but the expert or the coach or the speaker's own life has become more and more part of the story. And I think that women are more self-aware, more observant, do a better job of combining their personal lives with everything they've observed out there. And so I think that women, because the self-help industry has changed and it's more about sharing of your own lives, that's perfect for women. But I think it's just that women also are more empowered now, and it's partly because of the internet. Because I know for me, like as a working mother, I'm not sure I could have done it except for the early advent of cell phones. Like I was one of the earliest adopters when, believe it or not, I think it was like $1,000 a month when I was on Wall Street to have a
Wow.
cell phone. It was insane. But I could have one very early, and that enabled me to keep working and be a mom. I mean, I remember trading stocks, standing and watching the kids on a roller coaster, and I'm on the phone with the trader at Payne Weber or wherever, like trading large amounts of stock for my hedge fund and thinking, wow, I couldn't do this without cell phones. And then,
Right.
then the internet came along and made it even better. But I think that it's enabled all of us who are natural multitaskers to join industries that might have been more dominated by men in the past, because we are availing ourselves of these technologies that allow ourselves to be spread thinner, right?
Right.
But in a way that I feel is empowering. I mean, I feel empowered by the fact that I have the cell phone and the internet and that I can be doing three things at once.
Yes, absolutely. Me too. But also, I feel empowered and I feel overwhelmed as a woman as well. It's both at the same time.
Well, that's one of the things I address in the book, because I've always been such a busy woman, and you want to be the best possible wife and the best possible mother and then the best possible worker or volunteer or
Or
whatever else
friend
you
or
do.
everything. Right.
Right. And you
Right.
can't do it all perfectly. And so a big emphasis of my Simply Happy book is to help you get out of that place where you think you have to be perfect. And let me give you a great example. Christmas. I have a whole new strategy for Christmas. I started this a couple of years ago, and I love this. I strive to not have a perfect Christmas because it makes me so much happier. So, for example, I go and take the very first tree they offer me at the tree place, the very first one. And I was talking to a psychologist about this who interviewed me for his radio show the other day. And he said, "Oh my gosh," he said, "you're doing cognitive behavioral therapy to yourself,
Yes.
because you are forcing yourself to take an imperfect Christmas tree so that you are now on the path. There's no going back now. I have this imperfect Christmas tree in my living room. I just tweeted it today. There is no going back. I have now I'm on my path. I'm going to have my imperfect Christmas. I am not cooking everything myself. I am going to give a lot of gift cards, checks. I'm not sending a Christmas card out this year because I can't deal with it. And I'm going to have an imperfect Christmas, and I will be so much happier because by getting that imperfect Christmas tree and setting myself down that path, I'm all in. It's not going to be perfect. I noticed that the outdoor lights on our outdoor tree are all, there's nothing left now at the top. The lights must have gone out. That's okay. We'll live with that. It just looks like a Christmas shrub now instead of a pointy pine tree.
Well, I love
But
that you're
that's
saying this.
what I'm doing.
I love that you're saying this because I have a book coming out by a publisher next year, and guess what it's called? The Messy Truth. And my whole mindset is around diving in, embracing your messy brilliance. And what I mean about messy is imperfection, that you can find the beauty and the power inside your imperfections and really allow them to come out. And I love that you're doing that around the holidays, because I think more of us need to do that, especially around stressful times. Just allow
So,
for it.
yeah, chapter 4 of Simply Happy, chapter 4 is called Life is a Happy Mess.
Oh,
And
I love
and the
it.
subtitle is Strive for Excellence, Not Perfection.
That's awesome. Chapter 4. I'm writing
That's
this
your
down.
chapter. That's Kelly's chapter.
And all my friends make fun of me because I am kind of like, my purse is always a mess. And I'm like, you know what? When I go into my purse, I can find anything that I need. Anything. I need a tampon. I need, lipstick. I have 4 of everything. And when I clean it up, I get all stressed because then I can't find anything. So it is known, I am known for being somewhat of a messy person, but I can get a lot done, and I'm a lot happier when I allow things to be messy sometimes. I wish more of us could do that. So I'm really excited that part of your book addresses that. That's awesome. So I hope that all of our listeners will get your book, talk about your book. How can we find out more about you?
I have a website, which is amynewmark.com. Somebody made it for me. I don't even really know what's on it. There's also the chickensoup.com website. There's also my Twitter, which is at Amy Newmark. The book itself, the Simply Happy book, is at Walmart, Rite Aid, Barnes and Noble, Books a Million, and I
Amazon.
think
Yeah.
everybody, Amazon, of course, but I always say them last. Independent bookstores,
Yes.
I always put Amazon last because they're
Yes.
the big guys.
I'm in Seattle. Sorry, they're
Oh,
big
look,
here.
I don't have anything against Amazon. All those publishers who complain about Amazon, Amazon has never been anything but good for us.
No, but we're going to have you up on our site, on our homepage, with your book next to this interview and conversation. But in moving forward, you can contact Amy at amynewmark.com. You can go to Chicken Soup for the Soul. Is it chickensoupforthesoul.com, Amy?
Yeah, and you can contact me. I have a special email address for my readers, and it's amy at chickensoupforthesoul.com.
Wonderful contact. That's great. Well, thank you so much for speaking with us today. I'm so inspired by what you've done and the choices that you've made to really evolve Chicken Soup for the Soul into this century now and really move it forward so that it even reaches more people than it already has, which is just amazing. So thank you so much.
Well, thanks for letting me talk about my favorite subject today. And I hope that you and your 6 children have a great Christmas. I have 4 myself from this blended marriage of mine.
Oh,
So I
wow.
understand the large group of children, and it's so much fun, isn't it?
It's a lot of, it actually is. It's really fun. So thank you
Yeah.
again, Amy. And thanks, everyone. Please reach out to Amy or me if you have any questions about this book or any other publication by chickensoupforthesoul.com. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kelly.
Bye.